Good morning. Welcome to the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar. We're Wednesday, March 15th today, 2023. Welcome to the webinar. I'll go ahead and share my screen here and we'll get started. So welcome to the webinar during Women's History Month. And we're excited today to welcome our panel of speakers to showcase women trans femme folks here in Minnesota and talk about education today. We introduced in the Zoom chat box here and invite you to put your name, your location, and who's your favorite women trans femme bike collaborator or influencer. So please share that information in the chat box and we'll look at the answers here to share with the group and welcome you to the webinar. The purpose of the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network is to connect local bike walk leaders to share stories and ideas about how they're lifting up the walking and biking culture in their communities. The land acknowledgement statement for Bike MN, we want to acknowledge that we occupy the ancestral land of the several indigenous groups, including the Dakota, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Cheyenne, Oto, Iowa, and Meskwaki people. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We affirm the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities. Despite centuries of colonial violence, this is still and always will be Indigenous land. Indigenous peoples are still here, demonstrating innumerable talents and gifts in the midst of continued oppression. They must be celebrated and uplifted. You'll see on the screen here and in the chat box, there's a link and you can click on that link to find out what native land that you are located on. Walk Bike Fun is the Bike MN youth education program for walking and biking, and there is an upcoming training in LaPorte. This is for teachers, educators, and school administrators. The training dates are a two-part training combination of virtual training on Wednesday, April 19th from 12 to 4, and on-site training in person on Thursday, April 27th from 1 to 5. That will be at the LaPorte Public School. So this is something that does require registration and you have to attend both sessions. However, there is still time. So if you're an educator in Minnesota and you're up in the LaPorte area in the north central part of Minnesota here, go ahead and register with this training and get trained on the Walk Bike Fun curriculum. Some of you may also be part of the Minnesota Safe Routes to School Network. The upcoming webinars for that group include a webinar on April 6th from 10 to 11 on the topic of centering climate action and safe routes to school, and on Thursday, May 4th from 10 to 11 on the topic of making the most of statewide student data and safe routes to school. If you're not yet a member of the Safe Routes to School Network and would like to join, you can email juliej@movemn.org. So before we get into the content and welcome our first speaker today, I want to welcome the larger group of participants on the webinar. We have folks from Richfield, from Rochester, Minneapolis Uptown, another Minneapolis here. A lot of Minneapolis folks here on the webinar today. So welcome to folks. And this is a statewide webinar. So folks all throughout the state of Minnesota who are leaders in the biking and walking work here are welcome to join. So our first speaker today, I'm going to go ahead and introduce at this time, is Angela Olson. Angela Olson is our education director here at Bike MN. Angela joined Bike MN in March 2022, has worked in the bike industry as a mechanic, service writer, and in sales, as well as leading rides and workshops for women trans femme folks. Advocating for cycling and pedestrian safety speaks to her passion for public health and access. Angela views her role at Bike MN as a perfect marriage between her personal interest and professional experience. Before joining Bike MN, Angela worked in the arts education field for public schools and museums across Minnesota. Most recently, she managed studio programs at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Cycling has been her main source of transportation since she moved to Minnesota in 2005, when she was gifted a yellow 1987 Schwinn road bike from her grandpa. In her spare time, Angela loves to bake, spend time with her family, and play in the backyard with her dog, Princess Leia. Welcome to the webinar, Angela.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? We're doing some audio stuff here. Well, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks so much for that introduction, Natalie, and thanks for joining us, everyone here. It's appropriate that the slide right after the Safe Routes Network slide is about one of our programs at Bike MN. So Natalie gave me a great introduction. I'm happy to be here as the education director at Bike MN. My main role here is to help support all of the education programming that we do. So I'm going to spend some time just giving you a brief overview of some of the things that we do in our education program. And then Helena and Jan will talk a little bit more about some specific things that they do with us. So, at Bike MN, we have several different programs. Our first program I'm going to talk about briefly is our statewide education curriculum program called Walk Bike Fun. That's funded through the Minnesota Department of Transportation as well as Safe Routes. This is a program where we travel across the state. We train teachers about how to implement curriculum for grades K through 8 on safe, fun, cycling, and pedestrian practices. We've got biking and pedestrian lessons, 12 of each, as well as an adaptive toolkit for teachers to learn how to help better serve students with disabilities. And I'll also say that in addition to it being good for educators and administrators, we've had law enforcement officers, city planners, council members all come to these trainings. And it's a great way to see how the intersection between engineering and education can really happen. So our next program I'll talk about briefly on the next slide is our Adult Learn to Ride. And I'm just going to talk for a second about it because Helena is going to talk a little bit more about this as the manager of that program. But this is a program where we teach adults how to ride bicycles who never, for whatever reason, learned how to ride. It's a Metro-based adult learning program funded by the Metropolitan Council. It has kind of 4 basic parts: a learn to ride portion, bike basics, where folks learn kind of basic best practices and law for biking on the street, a group ride, and then learning basic maintenance. And on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about our league cycling instructor seminars that we host here at Bike MN. We collaborate with the League of American Cyclists to do this, and we're in kind of a unique position at Bike MN because we collaborate with coaches. One of them is on this call, Jan, who will talk a little bit more about this, but we collaborate with coaches and the league to put on seminars here at Bike MN utilizing assistance that we're trying to kind of cultivate in the community. So we recently had one in the fall that was for BIPOC folks. We're having one in August that will be for women, trans, femme folks. There's a riding and education skills component. There's also another component where you kind of hone in on your own and are tested on your own skills. And we're really, really fortunate and lucky that we have a local coach, Jan Mathau, to work with us. The way we utilize league cycling instructors is to kind of connect them with different opportunities across the state for bike rodeos or other educational opportunities that they might have. We kind of help manage that network of LCIs in Minnesota. So next slide. And the last program that I'll talk about is our People-Friendly Driver program. This is a pilot program, which currently we don't have a funding source for. This is a program where we educate people from the perspective of driving and how to be a responsible and safe people-friendly driver, right? What are the best practices for sharing the road with cyclists, interacting with pedestrians? We talk about basic pedestrian and cycling laws, as well as some of the laws that apply to certain situations that drivers might encounter with a cyclist or a pedestrian. We also go over the top 5 habits of a people-friendly driver, which I won't tell you now because I want to encourage you to come and attend. So we have one coming up next week, I believe, on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. And it is about a 45-minute virtual class that you can take. We also will come to your organization and teach this program. It's a great supplement to any other kind of like driving education that's going on, because we really kind of focus on how does the interaction between vehicle drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians kind of occur in a safe and harmonious way. The main focus is to say that we all deserve to share the road, and we all deserve to get to where we're going safely. So Josh is asking if it's free or at a cost. So the class that we're teaching next week is free. Sometimes we do collaborate with organizations. Oh, it was last Wednesday. Thank you, Helena. But we'll do more. So the virtual ones we've been hosting are free. If you want to bring us to your organization, we can talk a little bit about, because that does involve a little bit more work. So we can talk about what the fee for service would be. But keep an eye out on our events page on our website for people-friendly driver classes and other classes that we'll be teaching. So I think that's it for all of my slides. I think Helena is going to start talking next a little bit more in depth about Learn to Ride. If you have any questions for me about the education programming, you want to get involved, anything like that, my contact is just my name, Angela@bikeamend.org, and I'm always happy to talk shop, scheme about ways to bring cycling and pedestrian education to you and your community. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that overview, Angela. This is wonderful to hear this broad perspective on all of these different education programs that are being offered by BikeMN and for different audiences of folks who would like to receive some education. So I'll just pause for a moment and see if there are any questions related to people-friendly driver, walk, bike, fun, the LCI seminar. And as Angela had mentioned, we have 2 other speakers today, so you're going to hear a little bit more from them. But I just wanted to see if anyone else has any other questions that you would like to ask Angela before we move to our second speaker today. And we did take a couple out of the chat box. You're welcome to go off mute and ask live and on video if you would like to do that. That's also an option. We encourage folks, if they want to ask a question directly, you can unmute and do so. You've all come into the webinar today muted, so you will have to unmute to be able to ask a question. And you'll see in the chat box that there is a link to our education programs page on the BikeMN website. So thank you, Angela, for putting that into the chat box. All right, well, we'll move on to our second speaker here today, and definitely continue to ask questions either in the chat box or hold them to ask directly when we get done with our second speaker. Our second speaker today is Elena Howard. Elena Howard is our education associate here at BikeMN. Elena grew up biking around Bloomington, Minnesota, and moved to Minneapolis in 2015, where she worked at Animal Humane Society, providing low-cost vet care and snuggling baby animals. During this time, she attempted to bike across the country, which sparked her interest in bike repair. In her 3 years as a professional bike mechanic, she felt most fulfilled when getting someone rolling again who needed their bike for transportation. She facilitates bike repair nights as a volunteer for Grease Rag, a Twin Cities group for FTW riders. When not riding her bike, Helena loves sewing, puppetry, dance, and taking her dog Gracie on long walks. Welcome to the webinar, Helena.
Thanks, Natalie. I also talk to my dog a lot, so that's accurate. Great. So again, I'm Helena Howard, Education Associate at the Bike Alliance, where I manage our Adult Learn to Ride program. And I'm going to tell you all about this wonderful program. You can go to the next slide. So Adult Learn to Ride is a 4-part series of classes that's currently available in the Twin Cities metro area. We teach adults how to balance, pedal, and ride safely in traffic. And we spend most of the class practicing riding and handling in a big, wide, empty parking lot. And then in the final class, we get to go on a celebratory group ride together to try out our new skills. It's a really fun and rewarding program to be a part of. And there's really no better feeling than seeing somebody pedal a bike for the very first time as they're cheered on by all of their classmates. Can go to the next slide. So most of our participants are immigrants and refugees, and most are also women. We've had students of all ages from 16 years old to about 70 so far. And when we ask folks why they've decided to sign up for this class, they usually say that they didn't grow up with access to a bike, they weren't allowed to ride a bike, or they had a bad riding experience as a young person and just never tried again. Many of our students tell us that they want to learn so they can try commuting by bike, or because they want to be able to ride with their children or with their friends. And because there's sometimes a language barrier, we partner with community organizations to help spread the word and get folks signed up for the classes. And we also recruit class assistants who have shared language and cultural experience and who can help translate and support students during the class. One issue that we come across a lot is how to ride a bike while riding traditional Islamic dress, including long skirts and dresses and headscarves. In our classes, we always bring some rubber bands, and these are really helpful for students so that they can either modify the length or the flowiness of their skirt. And we also recommend a lot tying your hair low on your, like along your neck under a headscarf to better fit under a helmet. I have a link here that maybe Ted can put in the chat for a really good blog post by Cycle and Jam that goes into depth about all the tips and tricks on how to prevent your flowy clothing from getting sucked into your chain or your rear wheel. And personally, I wear a lot of long skirts and I ride my bike year round. So I can say confidently that riding a bike in flowy clothing and long dresses is a totally doable thing. And it can be really comfy. Can go to the next slide. So here's a couple of quotes that I wanted to share from last year's participants. Coltham says, "I grew up in Kenya and we were never taught how to ride a bike. It takes forever to get to my clinicals, my classes, or from point A to B using public transportation. So I got motivated to learn." And Morsal, who's pictured here, says, "Back home in Afghanistan, women were not allowed to ride bikes. When I ride my bike, I feel free as a human being. I am proud of being a woman, and I feel that biking gives me more confidence and motivation. I love it." So we got to know Marcel pretty well because she continued coming to classes as a volunteer for the rest of the summer. We learned that she'd moved to Minnesota as a refugee just a few months before we met her, and she was biking to work every day. And if you want to hear more about her inspiring story, Marcel gave us a great interview that you can read on our website. That's also linked on this slide. Can go to the next slide. So a little history of the Adult Learn to Ride program. These classes have been happening in Minneapolis and St. Paul for over 10 years, led by organizations Spokes and then Cycles for Change. And when Cycles for Change closed in 2020, they passed the program along to Bike MN. We're currently funded by the Metropolitan Council with the aim of reducing vehicle miles traveled, pollution, and congestion. And this grant expanded the program to 13 cities in the metro area. We taught 25 Learn to Ride classes last year. We reached 120 students, distributed about 75 bikes, along with locks, helmets, and lights. And the classes were in really high demand and would sell out, or registration would close within like a day or two. So this year, our goal is to offer even more classes, and we hope to distribute over 300 free bikes. Next slide. Here's just a list of some of the community partners that we worked with last year and are working with this year. African Career and Education Resources, African Community Services, St. Paul Public Housing, International Institute, Joyas Latinas, Ukrainian American Community Center, and then several different community education and parks and rec programs. Next slide. All right, and our vision for this program going forward is we would love to expand Adult Learn to Ride statewide using a train the trainer model, our network of Bike MN chapters, and by connecting with local organizations. We know that there's a need for this program further out than just the metro area, because we have people around the state asking if we have classes near them or asking how they can get involved. We'd love to pilot this program in cities we have a strong existing partnership in and with significant immigrant and refugee populations like Rochester, St. Cloud, or Mankato. But I'd like to open it up to all of you and ask a couple of questions. Do you have any ideas or connections that could help this program grow? And do you see a need for this program in the communities that you live in or work in?
I'll speak to this for Rochester. We have a definite need, and this is something that we would love to bring down with the help of kind of the mothership up in the Twin Cities. And we have been building out capacity with a number of other local organizations. Our bike workshop is primarily run currently through our local Hispanic Latino organization, and then we have been building up relationships with the like local Black entrepreneurs, as well as Pamoja Women, which is a primarily African American recent immigrant women run organization that's done really amazing work locally.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. We'd love to connect with you, and maybe you could help us pilot the program and expand it.
At Cycling Without Age Twin Cities, we're always looking for volunteers, and it might be interesting for your trainees, once they've sort of graduated, to become pilots in our Seward food access program. So maybe Helena, you and I could talk offline at some point, but that might be a great way for people to get involved beyond just learning how to ride.
Definitely. Yeah, at the end of class, we always have like a list of resources and group rides that people can join that are like slower, no drop rides. And I could definitely add something like that. People
Cool.
are always looking for ways to ride their bike after class ends.
Thanks.
So Helena, this is you put Rochester, and Eric mentioned the interest in the southern part of the state here, and Tony mentioned the metro. We've kind of put maybe St. Cloud and Mankato on the spot here. If there's anyone on the call that's from those other communities or other communities throughout the state, it doesn't have to be St. Cloud or Mankato. You know, we'll just hold the moment here if you wanted to share anything or any interest, or why this might make a whole lot of sense for your community to offer up a Learn to Ride program. All right, well, any other ideas or connections? I'll go to the next slide here if that's all right, Helena, and then we'll put up your contact information. And there's some links here as well. So if you do want to share some additional ideas, you have thought of some connections after you're thinking about the content that's been presented today, definitely reach out to Elena at bikemn.org and then ask your question and get connected there. So I'll pass it back over to Helena for a moment just to close out your segment of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And I have a few links that Ted's putting in the chat right now. One is our Adult Learn to Ride email list, where you can hear about when classes are happening and how to register. And then a link to sign up to be on the volunteer list for Adult Learn to Ride within the Metro. And then we're really excited that we've just had the Minnesota Bicycling Handbook translated into Somali and Spanish as part of our Learn to Ride program. And you can download the handbook, translated handbook, at that link. And then there's just my email address, helena@bikemn.org, if you want to talk more about Adult Learn to Ride.
I finally found the unmute bit here. I have a couple of questions. I've spent quite a little time with our bike walk group in Mankato, and often teaching kids in the group that do not know how to ride. And I have split that down into parts. And I'm quite sure that those parts probably are amenable to adults learning to ride. And I'm sure that there's another factor in adults, and that is I am afraid of falling. And what I do, if I can find a nice grassy slope, And I tell the kids that the big thing that you're going to get into trouble with on this, if you fall off, is your mother is going to be upset with the grass stains. But other than that, I have discovered that like the Wright brothers, you need to learn to glide before you add power. And so if we get balance down first, and then I've discovered also that some kids do not know how to pedal. So I'm thinking about using my Kurt Kinetic and dragging it along and putting the bike on the Kurt Kinetic, and we'll study pedaling for those who haven't played tricycle and this kind of thing. And then we get the balance, and then we start putting the pedals back on and using the cranks. And if in those steps, that seems to work. Now, I'm not sure what you have been using for adults as far as balance is concerned. Parking lots are not, you don't have a glide factor by going downhill. And so pedaling becomes important to the start, and that's a whole bunch of things at once. And then the last step is I tell them that I have a secret known only to me and Greg LeMond, is how you turn. And I will share this little secret with you, and that is to turn, you need to turn the wrong way first. And then the bike turns over, then you just chase it around. And I have found this works, and I have found my students, generally, the girls work out better than the boys. They don't have so much ego wrapped up in their personalities. And so they get on, and I had one Somali girl who was suddenly sitting down all hunched up, and what are you doing? I'm thinking. And she said, okay, I think I've got it. And bingo, she had it. So that was great. And it's really exciting to get somebody, on it. Wow, I can do this. So I'm not sure what you're doing with the balance part versus the pedal part, and et cetera. Enough of my tirade.
Thank you, Richard. And I'll give Alina a chance here to just maybe respond. There was a lot involved in your answer there, and a lot of layers, but lots of good tips. And so I'll pass it over to Helena. Did you want to speak to any of the components of his comments, maybe about countersteering or any of the other items that he brought up during his piece there?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing all that. Almost everything you said is exactly what we do with adults. We are in a parking lot, so there's not too much of a slope, but I've found out that no parking lot is totally flat. And we can usually find we find like a slope one way, and we definitely use that to our advantage. And just like kids, and I think what you're doing too is we take the pedals off and focus on balance first. We put the seat down far enough that everyone can put their feet flat on the ground. So that really helps a lot with convincing people that they're not going to fall over. It's definitely more of an issue with adults who are higher off the ground, more careful in general, and maybe more prone to getting hurt, and the injury like lasting longer. So I try to tell people, like, you're really walking with a bike in between your legs, and you can put your feet down whenever you need to, and that seems to help a lot. And then the thing about countersteering, I think, is a really good tip. And I've used that to talk about like quick turns, but telling people about steering the wrong way a little bit first is something that I'll try with the new students too. I think that could be really helpful because it gets you leaning in the right way to actually make the turn.
Well, I find that some adults say, well, no, I don't do that, but they do.
Yeah, it's subtle and it's kind of counterintuitive.
The other thing that I don't tell students is you probably won't get hurt learning. You really screw up later when you know how to ride. So
Yeah. And you're more likely to fall over if you're not going fast enough. So that's also hard for people to wrap their head around.
So I have one question here from Eric with his hand up, but before we move to you, Eric, Richard, do you see any opportunities in your community for this Learn to Ride program?
yes, I was now that I'm approaching 2 years older than God, I'm sort of hung up my tag as a league cycle instructor, but I still know I know how it's done. But anyway, that's yeah, it's fun getting people to ride. It's kind of a neat experience.
That's great. Well, maybe you can be a volunteer as part of the Learn to Ride program. So, so I see Eric has his hand up, so I'm going to pivot over to Eric if you'd like to ask your question.
It's not so much a question, just kind of some additional comments. So one of the things that we're doing in Rochester is kind of augmenting our already existing run by the Parks Department adaptive bike program. And with that, we had sourced from a different city organization a couple of bikes that we're going to be turning into adaptive bikes with the link that I threw in the chat, which is essentially adult-sized training wheels. And so while there's definitely, riders who the issue is that they don't know how to balance, there are also riders for a number of reasons who maybe balance isn't an option. And this might be a more affordable route to that, as opposed to a full adaptive, tricycle or four-wheel bike, mobility device. And yeah, just wanted to make sure that that resource was known. I also wanted to briefly go back to the previous question that I had talked to in terms of organizations. So another organization that a lot of us, and especially in the larger cities, can be working with or partnering with that will be great at reaching some of the similar demographics that the program in the Twin Cities had reached is Isaiah, Minnesota. They are a faith-based organization, but they have great connections with a lot of churches and mosques throughout and synagogues throughout the state. And they're very, the mosques especially seem very motivated at kind of addressing a lot of the transit equity issues that population set experiences at higher rates than the white population in our state. So I'd encourage you to reach out to the chapter representative of Isaiah, Minnesota, if you haven't already, especially for folks in Mankato and St. Cloud and really everywhere that that has kind of that chapter representation.
So Helen, a question. This is Tony. What is the gender breakdown of all of your trainees, would you say?
Yeah, I don't have an official number, but I'd say it's like at least 90% women, maybe more.
Okay.
There's usually like one man in the class, if
Sure,
that.
sure. Look, yeah, that's kind of squares with what I thought it would be, but I was interested. Just 2 weeks ago, the National Transportation Survey for the state of Finland came out, and cycling there is 60-40, and 60 is women. It's awesome. What they've been able to do. Thank you.
So thank you for all these comments and all these questions. And I think, Helena, with your questions, it really helped to prompt a nice dialogue here with the group. So thanks for putting those up on the screen and guiding us into some dialogue among the group here. So would you like to provide a little closing wrap to your segment of this presentation before we pivot to the third and final speaker?
I don't think I have much else to say other than thanks everyone for your input and ideas and comments. And please feel free to reach out to me if you think of other things. And if you know anyone who needs to or wants to learn how to ride a bike, hopefully they can either make it to one of our classes this summer in the metro, or maybe next year we'll be somewhere closer to them.
Wonderful. That's such exciting news. You know, it's great to hear about the program in the Metro, but it's like really cool to hear that this is getting expanded into places throughout greater Minnesota, and there's opportunities there and there's demand there. And this lines up with getting more folks riding their bike for transportation around their community. So wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation, Elena. I'll go ahead and share my screen again here, and then we will switch over to our third speaker for today. So I'm excited to introduce Jen Matthews, a league coach supporting Bike MN here. And Jan is our third and final speaker today, talking during Women's History Month here in March 2023 about education. Welcome to the webinar, Jan.
Hi, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Just so everyone knows, if you haven't seen or heard about me, it's because I've been that silent partner on the backside of Bike Men for quite a while. I got started in advocacy in 2012 with what was called Richfield Bike Advocates, now Bike Walk Richfield, and then took basically what I love to do outside of work, which was volunteering, teaching, and biking, and I put them all together. So I started doing bike rodeos and hosting open streets. I joined the Bikemen Education Committee. I became a league cycling instructor in 2014. At which point I had so much fun. I said, hey, is there any way I can help with these? And the answer was, of course you can. And so for the next 4 years, I continued to come to all of the seminars and learn about teaching. And then in 2018, I was accepted as a league cycling coach. At the time, I was the second female coach in the country. There was another gal who also got inducted when I did. So then we became 3. And now we're up to 6. So there aren't a lot of us, but our numbers are growing, and it's great to know that we're out getting more involved in teaching. I've also done ride marshaling. I've done all kinds of things. I love volunteering. I love biking. And if you can look at my picture there, I love kids. So I do teaching for both kids and adults. And it's funny how I define myself more by my activities than I do my profession. I'm an HR professional. That's almost like my side gig because I love doing this so much. So if you want to switch to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about, we've had seminars throughout the state. Most of them are in Minneapolis. But if you look at the pictures, we've got a wide variety of folks. So male, female, we have different backgrounds. We have some classes who are more male. We have some that are more female. We started really looking at how can we get more folks involved. And that's one thing that I'm really proud of, is that if you look at some of the seminars across the country, they're not very diverse. And I think we do a really good job of trying to get ourselves in front of as many different groups as possible and allowing people to be able to get out and teach in their communities. So if you know anybody who would be a great instructor of smart cycling, please get them connected with us. It's a lot of fun and it's very rewarding to do teaching, and it allows folks to do what they love and be able to help others. Anywhere from, I know last year we had a bunch of our Learn to Ride folks actually came into the seminar, and then they actually got signed off as instructors within the same year. So it's really exciting to see that we're making that kind of impact. And then, like Angela said, we are having the Women Trans Femme seminar in August, and then we're going to have another BIPOC seminar in the fall in October. So if you want to come see what it's all about, let us know. But we're always looking for volunteers and people that want to help out. And that's about all I have. And if you wonder why I'm the only coach, it's because my friend Nick Mason moved to Sweden and Håkan retired. So I all of a sudden went from being that silent partner to being the only partner. So glad to talk to everybody.
What an amazing story. And thank you so much for being with us here, Jan. It's great to hear the connection that you have with education and bike education and volunteering here in Minnesota. So we'll pause for a moment here to take any questions that folks might have. And that could be, about league cycling instructor seminar or, anything else that Jan shared here. As folks are thinking about their questions, maybe we can use the features of Zoom here. Raise your hand if you're a league cycling instructor. We can, I don't know if you guys are on gallery view and you can see, I have Barb is on here and maybe some other folks also, Elena and other folks. So, and Dorian. So just, it's great to have some of these league cycling instructors on the webinar today. And also if you are interested and you are not yet a league cycling instructor and would like to become one, definitely reach out to Jan. So let's just pause for a second and see if there's any questions in the chat box here. And then and Tina Moen. So also another LCI on the webinar. So one of the things that comes to mind, Jan, is the league cycling instructor seminar that we held in Rochester, Minnesota, Greater Minnesota seminar, which was well attended. And there were quite a few folks that became instructors out of that seminar.
We've had Rochester, we've had Bemidji. I believe we were working on Mankato at one point and then something happened. I think it might have been COVID. So yeah, like if anybody has the ability to host us someplace not in Minneapolis, we are more than happy to come to you.
Very good. Well, thank you, Jan. And as you mentioned, you mentioned a couple of opportunities in August and then October for folks who want to become league cycling instructors. And so definitely reach out. And I'm sure there's some links here that that we can share to promote those league cycling instructor seminars and to share that registration link when it becomes available for each of those courses. So definitely stay tuned and get involved. You might sign up for the Bike and Men newsletter if you'd like to hear about updates about this, or the Wheels and Walks newsletter, so that you can get plugged in and hear when these education opportunities do come up. So lots of ways to get plugged in. Make sure that you hear about them so you can sign up if this is something that's of interest to you. So Jan, there's a question in the chat box here. Can you share your contact information with folks, or is there a way that they should get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach out if they want to get a hold of you? And maybe it's through Bike and Men too. So what would you like to share with folks?
You can actually send it to coaches@bikemen.org.
All right, thanks, Jan.
Mm-hmm.
All right, very good. So there's a couple of closing slides here, and then I do have Dorian online here from the Hill with a brief legislative update to close as well. So we'll get to that in just a moment here, Dorian, and make sure that you have an opportunity to share a little bit of that at the close. So, and if you come across any questions, definitely pop in the chat, and we'll just have a little closing Q&A here at the end as well. So Safe Routes to School Boost Grant funding is now available. So if you're interested in this, these are larger dollar amounts, $5,000 to $50,000 grants for non-infrastructure, Safe Routes to School. And this is for walking and biking in your community. Mark the date, May 17th is the due date for the applications, and go to the link on the screen and in the chat if you'd like to get some more information about this Boost Grant opportunity through Minnesota Safe Routes to School, or some webinars that might help you learn a little bit more about that as well. The National Bike Summit is coming up in Washington, D.C., March 26th through the 29th. This is going to be the opportunity for in-person and online. So there is a hybrid opportunity this year again. So there's a schedule of meetings with representatives if they're there in person, and then also trainings and the lobby day, which is that in-person meetings on the Hill. So March 26th through the 29th. Go ahead and sign up for that if you'd like to go to DC or join remotely. The BFC, or Bicycle Friendly Community application deadline, was closed recently, and we have 4 communities in Minnesota that applied. So there's an opportunity if you would like to provide any input. There's a short survey you can fill out. The deadline is April 5th. So the communities are La Crescent, Woodbury, Hennepin County, and Hutchinson. If you have ridden bike in these communities, or maybe you live there, feel free to go ahead and access that short survey and provide a little of your inputs if you would like to do so. And the league will help to consider those comments as part of their evaluation of the community to determine their award level. Coming up in March and April, Greater Minnesota events. Coming up here, well, I mentioned the Boost Grant. There's a webinar on March 28th. Smiles Adaptive Bicycle Expo in Mankato on March 31st. Ragnarok 105 in Red Wing on April 1st. MnDOT Safer School Boost Grant webinar, another one on April 12th. Fat and Happy in Stillwater on the 4/15. And then every Thursday, Women's Night Fat Biking and Nordic Skiing in Duluth. In the Twin Cities, you see that on April 15th, St. Paul Bike Coalition monthly meeting. On the 16th, 30 days of biking content creation. We have another slide. We'll show a little bit more detail on that. That's tomorrow. And then again, tomorrow, bike maintenance training course. So Helena, maybe you can confirm or whether or not that's still happening tomorrow. And then 3/28 microtransit webinar for Movement Minneapolis. You'll see that on the right side of the screen there. And then April 1st, 30 days of biking Minneapolis kickoff. And then there might be other kickoffs throughout the states on the 30 days of biking. On the 8th of April, Minnesota Randonneurs Spring Conference. And of course, this is just a highlight, and it is not an inclusive list by any means. There's lots of events going on throughout the state of Minnesota. And thanks for answering my question about that maintenance training course for tomorrow. It is sold out. So I guess stay tuned for further opportunities. It's a popular one. So thanks for the update there. Driftless Gravel Camp, Friday, April 28th through Sunday, April 30th in Winona. On the 29th, it's a free gravel ride. And this is going to be for FTW NB riders. That's coming up at the end of April. And then this is the further details on the 30 days of biking content creation tutorial happening tomorrow from 7 to 8. So go link on 30daysofbiking.com if you'd like to sign up and pledge to ride every day during the month of April, or get involved in learning a little bit more about the content. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Dorian for just a moment to provide an update from the Hill. So go ahead, Dorian. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, and thank you. I put a link to the blog post that we posted last Friday, which really goes into detail about all the bills that we're working on. I'm actually sitting in a Senate hearing room right now, waiting to testify on the May to Must Teach Bike Education bill. I'm pretty excited about that. It was heard in the House Education Policy Committee, and it passed unanimously, which is really exciting. It basically says right now schools must teach bike education, and they may teach bicycle and pedestrian safety. We think it's time to make that leap, that everybody should be getting at least a minimal amount of bike education and walking safety. So that's really it. Take a look at the blog post and let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks, Dorian, and how relevant for our education topic today. It's really cool to hear. We're just getting the broad spectrum of what's going on in Minnesota here for policy education on the ground, and who's rolling around in Minnesota here. Well, let's see here. We have a couple of minutes left. If there's any other questions that folks have for any of the speakers today, I know Angela had to drop off here, but we have Helena and Jan still on today. If you would like to ask them any other questions about education in Minnesota, we're just excited today to honor Women's History Month and showcase this panel of speakers today. And encourage you to again go on video if you'd like and ask your question. I also see a comment in the chat box here. Driftless Camp is full, but lots of spots open for Saturday's ride. So just, I guess, an update from what I shared. Thanks, Tina, for sharing that. or maybe that was Ted. So thanks for sharing that updates on Driftless. So, all right, well, if we don't have, okay, Dorian, did you have another question? I see a hand waving. Okay, oh, saying goodbye. All right, well, very good. So I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I don't see any other questions in the chat box. So I will go ahead and close our webinar for today. Thank you so much for attending. I want to give a plug for our April webinar coming up on the third Wednesday of the month. We're always third Wednesday of the month from 11:30 to 12:30. The topic will be safe routes to school funding and also bike to school day. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day.